Think that there's more content right now. Like if you look at, we're kind of, I guess, in this golden age of television, if you add streaming to that. And I think there's more pressure on the powers that be to produce content that is more reflective of the world that we live in, you know, and how diverse the world is that we live in. I think it's slowly changing. For me personally, I have seen a shift in the opportunities, but it's still a fight. There was a project that I wanted to move up and you know, I was like maybe like third in it, and I wanted to kind of be, there was a little bit of an opening, and I wanted to be considered for the top part post-Oscar, you know, and it was like, but hopefully, you know, coming out of the Oscar, that this window will give me an opportunity to finally do some of the things that I've wanted to do for a really long time, because, you know, I spent many, many years being the man next to the man next to the man, and that has a shelf life, man. That gets old.
Have there ever been any roles that were offered to you that really offended you?
I think some of the experiences that have offended me have more to do with, and this is kind of like the undertow, or like more like a camouflage version of racism, or seeing people in a very limited way. Like I remember there's a part that I was up for, and I spoke to the director, and I'm talking to him for like 10, 15 minutes, and he looks at me and he goes, yeah, I think you're just too nice for the part. I was like, huh. And he goes, yeah, you know, this guy's got to be like, you know, like a little, you know, grimy or whatever. And so basically he needs the real thing, right? He needs a street dude. And I said, well, you know, I would like to look at myself as a transformational actor. So I'm ground zero. I am who I am, but you got to build from that and create the character. So there's a sense with, at least with black people, that, and that's why you would see so many MCs easily shift into acting, because trained actors couldn't get hired. So they'll look at Robert De Niro or Leonardo DiCaprio or whomever, obviously extraordinary actors, and go, oh, we want you to play this mobster from so-and-so, and you're going to be in Boston, and they'll get an accent, they'll pick up weight or lose weight, dye their hair, Ryan Gosling put tattoos on his face for Place Beyond the Pines or whatever, and like you're looking at them and they've transformed. Yeah. But with the brother, they go, nah, we got to get 50 Cent for this. And it's offensive. So often you would see people from the music world who are viewed as being former thugs get placed into parts that are already written in a limited way, and who see people of color in a very limited way, but they're viewed as being the real thing and get plugged in when they don't value those people as characters.
Props, because even your pacing, like you're portraying a cat from Harlem and Luke Cage, and I'm like, even the way you space out your sentences at times, I'm like, he must have spent time in Harlem.
Yeah. My dad had a place in Washington Heights, and like at a very early age, I'd be like, you know, I was like 12, 13 or something, and I would be early for me, and I'd say, yo, let's go to Harlem. And he'd be like, here's some money, get some tokens and go to Harlem. And I'd be like, okay. And I'm like from the Bay, so I don't really know how to get around like that. Like I'm not in New York year round, so I had to hop on the A train and go down to 125th or whatever, and I would be walking around Harlem. And then I started going all the way down to the Village, and I'd be walking around NYU area, and like it was like Candyland to me. It was just all so new, and there's so much noise, and people, you know, you go on subways back then, and like people were like, they still do it a little bit, but like people were breakdancing, you hop off the thing, and like it's all the culture and the way people talked and the music. So I was just taking it all in, and then, you know, imitation is the highest form of flattery in some way. So you're just looking at it and absorb it and imitate, but embody certain things. And that's how acting has really served me. And, you know, and early on, I wanted to be a poet, like back in the day with the whole like poetry slam scene and whatnot. So, and just writing and having that kind of mind that likes to observe and write stuff down or like comment on it in some way, it means that you got to watch and pay attention. So I think it's all kind of served me in that way.
So I want to talk about upcoming roles. Do you consider the greater social or cultural impact of the roles that you might get?
I've never had the luxury to really be able to think about what impression I was making. I just wanted a job, you know, and was looking at parts that I could, well, can I do something with that part? Like, how do I move up where I actually have some power and influence to be able to say, this is what I want to do. And that's taken quite a bit of time to even get to that point. But the main thing for me is to always, even if I am playing somebody who is, we could all agree on, like, you know, Cottonmouth throwing somebody off of a roof is probably not an okay thing to do, that I have to make sure that that person has humanity still, though, that there's still like an internal struggle. Look, if you were going to produce the story of Moses is only good as his Pharaoh. So the larger point of the story is still being made, you know, through the character of Moses, through the protagonist, but you need the antagonist to be great too. It's just about being able to say, do I want to play Moses or do I want to play Pharaoh? And having that, getting to that point where you get to choose is a hard place to get to. Real quick, I'll tell you, there's this Roxanne biopic coming out. The character I play in that has little to no redeeming qualities in it, and so it was the toughest role of my life. Like, I literally had nightmares the last week working on it because he's really physically violent. I couldn't sleep. I felt horrible. It felt toxic. But to tell the hero's journey, you gotta sign up to play the devil, you know, and I just don't want to do that too many times, to make a short story long, which I'm great at. Just be a little long-winded.
No. We look forward to seeing Roxanne.
Listen, you alluded to music and some of the characters you played already, and this is interesting to us as DJs. We hear you make Spotify playlists for the characters that you play. Just curious if you could walk us through that process. I mean, Juan, who you play in Moonlight, he's an Afro-Cuban brother from down south.
Yeah.
You know, you sit down to make Juan's playlist. Like, how do you approach that?
You know, I got really conscious of like how you were affected by sound. Like, my first introduction to that was, I remember I was probably like 10 years old, and I had the radio on. I just started turning the music on at night to go to sleep to. And my mom walked in and she was like, yo, you can't, you turn the radio off. And I was like, why? She goes, because, you know, you don't know what you're taking in. That affects you. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I had to turn the radio off. Many years later, I remember I was wearing out the Infamous. I was wearing that album out.
By Mobb Deep.
Mobb Deep. Yeah. Oh my God!
You're making references that not all of our NPR listeners are aware of.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm thinking I'm on like a late night hip hop show. I'm just dropping into that mode with you guys. I'm sorry. I apologize.
We're trying to expand our horizons here. Mobb Deep's sophomore effort, The Infamous.
We're all there. You go. So I remember listening to that album and I was wearing it out. And what I started to notice was I would feel darker after I had listened to it for a while. And so then I became real conscious of vibe. So then if you put on A Tribe Called Quest, a group from the golden era who just released, you know, we got to give your listeners the whole.
I think the NPR audience might know who Tribe is.
They might know who Tribe is. They might know who Tribe is. Yes. Okay. All right. But if I would throw on Tribe or like De La or someone like that, suddenly it felt like there was like a buoyancy to their music, and I felt lighter. I felt like, oh, like the day was brighter. It was like, you know, Saturday afternoon. And
Saturday,
exactly. So I became real conscious of how music affects your vibration in the world at a pretty young age. And so later, as you're just learning how to put together characters, I started thinking, wow, this guy would not listen to the same things that I would listen to. So that's really what I began to do. And it's kind of one of the first things I do, because when I was doing Moonlight, I was working on 3 other projects. And so any given day, I could be on a different set. And so going to work or being in my trailer, I would click on a different playlist to kind of remind my body, like muscle memory, like, oh, you're about to step into Remy Danton's shoes, so you're on the House of Cards set. And just energetically, I would kind of remember Remy's voice or how he moves, just because Remy is somebody who would respond more to a Jay-Z when Juan is not listening to Jay-Z. You know what I mean? So that's really how music affects me, and how I've always related to it in terms of acting.